culture have always been important. They're always steeped in a very authentic and practical and well-known and democratized mission and values. But they became even more important after the pandemic and this move towards more hybrid and remote working, because it's not like everyone's in one place and you can, through osmosis, know each other and know what's going on. And so it's much more intentional now. And so the framework I'm going to share with you today is around this idea of connection, and the four connections that helped us to create belonging. So the first one is this idea of the company and the employees. And in each of these examples, you'll see the arrows go both ways. In a lot of companies, particularly before the pandemic, there was this top-down approach to driving things into the organization. With employee experience and with what we learned at Airbnb, it's much more around creating two-way dialogue, having opportunities to both give and get information, a lot more about listening, a lot more about vulnerability and not having all the answers, and knowing that the best place to find the answers is in the people who are closest to the business, to the customer, to the service or the product. And so our mantra was around this idea of doing things with and for employees, not to them. And when you do that, you're helping them to help you to prioritize rather than you have all the answers. And you're also not actually just asking them what are the priorities, but you're engaging them in designing the solutions. First Thursdays, which were an opportunity for employees who had a hobby or a skill or an experience that they wanted to share with others. And those employees would put it out there, they'd explain what it was, and then other employees could come to that session. We did it in person, you could still do it virtual, to learn out about everything from margarita making to bicycle maintenance to coding for idiots. And it was a really wonderful way to get to know each other and also learn a skill. I told the story the other day. We also had a group of people who were mindful and had a meditation practice, and they held a rotating group of leaders who did different meditation each Tuesday at 2:30. And it was a great way to kind of take a break and unwind, and also meet other people who were into mindfulness as well. Once every 12 to 16 months, that was called One Airbnb. It was so successful that, working with Chip again, we created the Airbnb Opens, which is where we brought 100, then 2,000, and 5,000 hosts together in a city around the world. We ended up having our hosts hosted by our employees. So in Paris, for example, we had 650 employees and we had 7,000 hosts. And those employees were there at the door greeting our hosts. They were on stage. They were hosting dinners around Paris and talking to hosts about what it's like to work and to host at Airbnb. So it was another way we really created and broke down the barriers between our employees, our hosts, and our guests, and developed a relationship and an understanding between employees and our customer.
An anecdote here, if anyone's ever gone wine tasting, which I know I've enjoyed from time to time, we can borrow actually a strategy from them, which is that when they give you that glass of wine, they'll say, oh, you might taste notes of strawberry or, I don't know, raspberry. I don't know, Mark, what other, I think I saw a picture of you with a wine glass, other notes that people might taste in their wine. The reason that they do this is so that they get you involved and pull you in from the start. They want to give you something that you can agree with or disagree with to open the conversation and get you engaged. And so we can think about similar pull strategies that give people a sense of ownership or a role from the start. Another thing that helps people have a role or ownership is to give them skin in the game, show them why this matters to them. So one of my favorite strategies is to use your own employees, maybe those who have gone through the change or the program, maybe a group of past resistors who are now sort of quote unquote on the other side, and they can speak to the impact that this program or initiative has had to help people feel more connected to not just the program, but the company. Another favorite strategy is to utilize a central question. In my background, a long time ago, I was a screenwriter, so I borrow a lot of tactics from the world of entertainment. But one of the reasons why we watch movies to the end or finish that season of White Lotus is we want to have an answer to the central question of that show. You know, who died in White Lotus, or what happened in Severance. And so you can use a similar sort of central question that your gathering is going to answer to pique curiosity and keep people invested to the very end.
Looking at all the titles of folks that have kind of RSVP'd for this, no one's title was retreat planner, right? So it's often it's often like, hey, I got to do my day job and somehow figure out how to do this big project. And often the leadership team or exec team may not actually know how much time this stuff takes, right? They may say, hey, go figure this out. And the reality is it's actually super important. This might be the 1, 2, 4 times in your whole year that your folks are getting together. This might be the cultural boost you need. So it's actually quite important to think about that time commitment. The wedding test, which is if you ask someone what their favorite moment of a wedding is, it's typically not like, I really like the steak. It's typically like, hey, the speech that the father or the bride gave, or some moment as part of that experience. And that's true of kind of gatherings at work as well. Like, how do you actually budget for this stuff? So we talk to companies who say, hey, we do like a larger offsite, which we have a higher budget for. Then we do kind of like smaller on-site offsites that perhaps are a bit more moderate in terms of our spend. So what we do is we help work with customers to help modulate that spend to achieve their objectives. But it, again, can't be just done on a one-off basis. You think about the different permutations of like, hey, our engineering team gets together, our people team gets together, our exec leadership team gets together. So what you then need to do is then translate that into an annual budget. And I don't know if there's any finance folks here, CFOs on this call, but that's something that a lot of folks are thinking about now as a line item within kind of T&E. And we all love savings. One of the things that we push is Marco or other folks in this space. We help companies save money through a couple of things. One is we have preferred relationships with hotel partners. We work with kind of folks in the travel ecosystem to get better rates for folks and to figure out when to book a retreat. A lot of folks might have this experience where their CEO says, hey, you got to do it in April 1st through 4th, this retreat, without really understanding that if you were to change the date or perhaps plan more proactively, you can save a lot of money. So there's some education to be done there. And then lastly, it's important to think about the spend on employee connection in conjunction with the spend on real estate. So all the savings that folks are having on real estate shouldn't actually go necessarily to the bottom line, right? And the reason for that is the reason we invest in real estate. One of the big reasons is to have a place where everyone can go. So now perhaps you're saving money on real estate. A lot of folks are. Now you perhaps need to think about that investment in employee connection.